as they come out. You may have heard, just for interest, the census results. Well, the census report was released earlier this week on the 10th of October. So we are expecting the actual data to be released in the coming months, which is which is quite important for the data community, because the last census was 10 years ago, effectively. And some of the data, as you can imagine, from a census perspective, is quite dated now. But there are also many other data sources out there from a public interest perspective that keep a lot of our data up to date. Some of it by Stats SA, but by many other organizations. There is also, of course, private sector data, which you can obtain in different ways. I'll mention a couple of examples here. But most of our focus is on kind of public sector data, so government data coming from entities like Department of Education or Department of Environmental Affairs. So if you are interested in public sector issues, this is probably good for you, or social issues, this is probably good for you. I am going to then try and start sharing. So hopefully this goes okay. I've got tabs, I've got windows. Okay, I'll start with PowerPoint. But before, okay, that should work. Let me try share. Does that work all right? Tiani, can you give me a thumbs up?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Great. I was going to ask how many people have seen this kind of presentation or worked with in the open data space, but it's not going to change too much what I do here. So rather, we'll save some time for questions as I go. Tiani, I'm not sure if you're monitoring the chat for questions. I've lost visibility. So yeah, if you can let me know if anyone wants to ask a question at any point, I'm happy to just stop midway. But I will break a couple of times just to show some examples and pause for questions, those kinds of things. So we'll go from there. So this is just something that we use quite regularly in trying to, I suppose, communicate or explain what open data is specifically. Of course, data doesn't have to be open for you to be able to work with it. So I think that's an important point to start off with. Data is data, and it might be available publicly, or it might be available only privately, especially if you're doing work on corporate private sector contracts. But our focus on this presentation and in much of our work is more your publicly accessible open data. So this is a spectrum, or an instance of the open data spectrum that's used quite widely to explain the different types of data availability. So this one is just an example that's been applied to the transport and mobility sector. I think it's in the UK. They developed, I see it's for Scotland. So here they explain the different kind of types of data availability. So closed data is usually data that you would only be able to access if you're employed in the organization and you work on relatively confidential or private data related to the organization, such as employment contracts, those kinds of things. And then moving from there, from very closed data to the other end of the spectrum, we start seeing slightly more open forms of data. So as an example, shared data is group-based access. So you might be able to apply for access to data sets by providing some kind of authentication, like you might have to log into the website to be able to download data, that kind of thing. And then on the very far end of the spectrum, towards the open end of the spectrum, is data that's just published openly on a website as an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF, and anyone can download it. As an example for the transport sector, in this case, is things like timetables, fares, routes, those kinds of things. So you could imagine, I think someone who one of the entities that publishes that kind of data quite regularly is, say, the Gautrain, or some of the bus services, some of the train services publish their fair route information, type table information publicly on their websites. Otherwise, it might be on a wall in the building, which is also a form of data, and you can just copy it from there. Anyway, so our focus tends to be on the open and shared data end of the spectrum in this case. But a lot of this could apply to what you do with more closed and confidential data in kind of business contract relationships that you might have. So just to explore some of the different types of research, data that you might work with, that we work with. So of course, just because we're a research council, we have an interest in, I suppose, I'm just calling it research data for here, but especially survey data, where they ask people's opinions on things, such as, rating the quality of a service or something like that. And they collect that through surveys that are done either through an online survey tool or some other form, just by measuring trends within, say, the economy, things like that. So from our perspective, work that StatsSA, HSRC does is more your kind of research data, especially survey-based data collection. Another kind of broad category of data is more your government administrative data. So that's data that's produced as government goes about its kind of day-to-day business. So that includes things like the Department of Health produces a database of medicine prices. Although I haven't checked that recently, I think they still publish it. And they publish that they used to publish that as a spreadsheet. They also have a lot of financial data. So you can access data on the South Africa, all the department budgets from National Treasury. And then there are various sector-specific data sources, like one example there is the air quality data platform, where you can access air quality data information across different parts of South Africa. And then there are various other kind of in-between types of data sources. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, your more private sector commercial data sources. One example there that you can see is on, say, Airbnb. So a lot of Airbnb data has been scraped and made available via portals. Of course, the commercial data sources can vary in their availability and their terms of reuse. So if you've ever worked with, say, Twitter, previously Twitter-related data, you would know that there are limits on how that data can be used, especially where it involves kind of personal information, that kind of thing. Then there are other sources. So some of the team at the University of Pretoria works a lot with South African news data when they're building some of their natural language processing models, those kinds of things. And then there is more structured kind of commons data, like on Wikipedia as an example, which is also used a lot increasingly used in some of the machine learning, large language model space, especially where they are scraping large amounts of structured and unstructured data. So that's just to give you a sense of different data areas. Then the next question is really, how may we use that data? So I think that a lot of people's kind of starting point, especially where data is just made available in a kind of public form as a spreadsheet or whatever, the starting point is often to do just some kind of basic trend analysis or some kind of graphing of that data to understand trends or relationships between different things. So this is an example of where budget data from, I forget, I think it's the Department of Basic Education, has been collected off the Vuleka Mali website. So if you're interested in budget data for South African government, you can go there and they have budget data, and you might then want to produce a column or a bar chart where it shows the changes in how much budget is allocated to education over the last, and in this example, it's over the last. People are looking to do is, if you adjust that budget for the budget data for inflation, you can see that the Department of Basic Education budget has actually been been flat over those years and actually even decreasing to some extent. So this is an important example of where trend analysis is showing us potentially two different stories, and we need to be able to interpret that data and use that data to support decision-making or advocacy work, or a variety of reasons. So this is just an example using budget data, so financial information from government. Of course, another example which you probably have run into a lot is where the data has got location information like an address or GPS coordinates, longitude and latitude. It's definitely become a much easier space to work in with a number of new tools that have been developed over the years. So in this case, you can, and I'll come back to this example later, and that's one we use for many of these kind of presentations, is education data. So sorry, schools data. So there's a list from the Department of Education where you can download the location of every single public school in South Africa with its longitude and latitude. And then you can import that into a mapping tool, an online mapping tool, and quite quickly do a map of all the locations of schools around South Africa. And that can allow you to do various things to understand how the location of a school relates to the population density, or in just building an app that can show you the location of your nearest school, or a variety of other things. So spatial data is a really great area to work in, and something, if you've never worked with it before, it's definitely one you should consider working with, because it's much easier these days with the tools that are available. So we may come back to that later. Another use of data is in storytelling, especially increasingly by journalists who are writing articles. So this is an example. I'm not sure if you would have seen it, but I think it was the Road Traffic Agency, released data on the number of crashes per type of vehicle. And there was a lot of bad publicity for VW Polo drivers, because they were shown, they had the largest number of fatal crashes. But the reality is, when people actually dug into the data a little bit more, by looking at the number of vehicles there are on the roads of each type and the actual percentage of fatal accidents, it was found that other vehicles were more responsible for accidents. And then, as perhaps might be expected, the Toyota Quantums and the Toyota Hiaces came out quite high on that list, but which also raises another question about those vehicles, especially, and because of the amount of time they spend on the road, the higher probability that they'll be involved in accidents. So it's just to give you an indication of how there are a lot of questions that have to be asked about data before making conclusions around, for example, which are the worst drivers or which are the most accident-prone vehicles in the country. Even though from a first look you might make assumptions about what the data is saying. But anyway, just to say that data is increasingly being used as part of kind of storytelling process. And you may, if you're interested into this kind of space, you may want to, for example, set up a blog on Medium and then embed data into that blog. Then another use of data, and one you might be, especially if you're into building apps, web apps or mobile apps, you may want to connect the data directly into your app. And there's various ways of doing that, of course. So you may just want to import kind of a static database into your app to use it for a certain user experience or use case. So this is an example. Again, you'd have to check if it's up to date. I think it is. The last time I checked fairly recently. But the one on the left is an example where they've taken open medicine pricing data of the Department of Health website. So that's a web app, a very basic web app. And then you can enter the name of whatever medication that you that you might buy regularly, especially from private pharmacies. And it will show you the different package sizes for that medicine, and the prices for that medicine that you should expect. So this is regular prices for medicine are regulated. And it'll also enable you to find generics, which are often cheaper alternatives to that medicine. So this is an example of an app that's just a basic web app that's been built off medicine data that is a really potentially high impact for people who are looking for cheaper medicine using that open data. Another one that's been built more recently and actually has been replicated, I think, in Kenya and may have been Nigeria, I forget, somewhere in West Africa for elections. So they've imported data for the different candidates for, in this case, well, the most recent one, I think, was the local government elections. And you could enter the address where you live, and it would show you who the candidates were for ward councillor in your area. So again, a very simple web app built on static data source that is being quite widely used, and I think they had a few 100,000 users. And as I say, it's been expanded to a number of other countries on the continent for the elections or use in the elections. And these have been built by civic tech organizations that are based in South Africa. So you can have a look at some of those. And then, of course, data now increasingly being used to support training of models, especially in the machine learning space. This is just an example of Masakane, which is in which, especially that African use data, so that multilingual data is being used to train language models, so that to support translation, those kinds of services increasingly. So this is done by work that includes, amongst others, people at University of Pretoria and many others around the country. So if you're into the machine learning space, this is an example of where you might want to go. Okay, so I think that was just really to give an overview of the types of data and where data can be found and how it could be used. The next part of the presentation will just look at how to find the data and some of the design considerations when you're working with data going forward. So I'll just stop there for a little bit in case there's questions about what I've covered so far. I'm going to see if I can escape and I'm not going to share links right now. I'll do that in the next part of the presentation. So then you'll have a chance to interact a bit more with some of the tools. Oh, thanks, Tiani. You put one of the links in. I don't see anything in the chat. Anyone got a question for now? So thanks, Jocelyn. So the question is, would it be advisable to use both open data and closed data for a solution that involves creating a machine learning model to train it? Yeah, interesting one. So certainly open data can be used more easily as a kind of default response on that, because in general, open data has more open licensing terms. But it's become a much more contentious space, and as a responsible developer, we are needing to be a little bit more considerate of how data is used. So with open data, what you'll see with most formally released open data, such as spreadsheets published on websites, those kinds of things, you will see that it has a license. And I don't think I've got slides on the licensing, but essentially the licensing defines how you can use it, whether you should be acknowledging the creator of the data, whether you can use the data for commercial applications or purposes, those kinds of things. So the license will usually tell you how you can reuse that open data. and you would just need to align with those terms. So if you've worked in the open source space, you would be familiar with some of the rules related to reusing some of the open source software. Things like you can't use it for commercial purposes, as an example, based on how it's been licensed. So yeah, even with open data, you just need to be aware that the open data might have limits on how it can be reused. And then for closed data, of course, because the closed data is probably coming through some kind of contractual relationship that you have with a client or a partner that you're building a solution for, you would need to be careful on then how you use it broadly, whether it's for machine learning or non-machine learning use cases. So yes, you can use it, but you would need to be aware of how then it is processed within, say, a model, and then the risk that any personal, especially personal information or data that is licensed in a specific form can leak out of the model application. So if you built an application on top of a model that, say, let's just use an example of a large language model. So say you've used something to train kind of a chatbot, and you have got closed private data, and you've trained it with closed private data as well as public data, and someone asks the chatbot a question related to a group of women in a specific area because it's been trained on that type of data. That's obviously a major issue. So it's just about so ultimately, and a lot of the focus now, and especially with machine learning, is to kind of walk backwards a little bit to say how is, and to look at your data pipelines, so that you're preparing your data pipelines in a much more careful way, so that you're not just scraping large amounts of data, importing it, using it to train your models, and then you don't know really what your application is going to spit out, whether it's biased in any way or it's creating privacy issues. So if you're working in machine learning, it's important to go back to your data pipelines and to really ensure, not just from a quality perspective, but also from a privacy and a bias and confidentiality perspective, that you're not just using data that shouldn't really be used. Yeah, but otherwise, technically, I mean, you probably want to use a mix of data source. I mean, it's helpful to work with the diversity of data sources, I suppose. Yeah, is the masterclass recorded? Yeah, it is, as far as I know. So you should be able to pick up some of this later. I'm just thinking I'll try to find a couple of more links on just kind of responsible machine learning practices. If you want to Google in the meantime, the Lelapa AI team has published a couple of guides related to responsible data and responsible machine learning practices that you might want to have a look at. And that will give you some guidance on some things related to licensing and privacy and bias, etc., so that you can build trustworthy models and applications. Okay. Yeah, definitely can share the slides after the meeting, for sure. Okay. I don't see any more chats or unmutes. I'm not sure if you can unmute. So yeah, feel free to put into the chat otherwise. So I'll go back to the presentation. I think it's still shared. I'll go to full mode just so that hopefully it's more visible. The next was really around finding and accessing data. So yeah, I'm not going too much into the data governance side of things. Today is much more just about really just about the different data types and finding the data and just looking and seeing how you might pull it into your apps. I do address some of the kind of governance responsible data practices a little bit later. But ultimately, as I mentioned before, a lot of how you work with data is about building your data pipelines so that you have good quality data and you're doing it in a responsible way. So then just in terms of finding data, we try to maintain this relatively old toolkit. Which got links to a lot of data, open data, public data sources. So if you Google Open Data ZA, or if you go to the link above, you'll be able to get links to various sources across sectors. So we try to curate anything related to any kind of data source, from water-related data, spatial or land-related data, as I highlighted earlier, public finance, budget data, especially by government, as well as so national, provincial government, as well as municipalities, some private sector data sources, especially the public ones, such as from the JSE, those kinds of sources. Then some of your typical ones, very popular ones around healthcare data, education data, air quality, police crime related data, as well as then some of the economy, agriculture, and cultural data. So depending on where you may have interest, you may also want to just explore these data sources to think about what kind of apps you might, if you're building an app, if that's where the hackathon is going, and you're quite keen to build an app, then you might just want to explore data sources to see what ideas it might trigger. So, for example, if you see, and I'll just keep using this example, like the school's master list, which has got the list of all the schools and their locations, then you might think, well, I could build, it might trigger an idea related to something that can help understand schools or provide guidance to people who are interested in where schools are located, those kinds of things. There is data also, I think it's released every year on matric results for every single school in South Africa. And it tells you what were the results for every school on which subjects. So you could actually do a quite granular analysis of school performance in different subject areas from just looking at their results. And there's a variety just within education. There's a database of unemployed educators with their skills, their locations. So I mean, you can think of all kinds of applications based on that kind of data, like helping educators to find employment, especially in kind of scarce skills area, say maths and science. If there's unemployed educators in maths and science, where are they located? What are their qualifications? Those kinds of things. So yeah, anyway, the possibilities are quite endless once you start digging into the data sources. And I usually find it great for stimulating ideas, just to browse through the data sources. Then just in terms of accessing that data, you're usually going to struggle because, well, it's a little bit of a struggle, but it's really well worth it. One of the reasons it's a bit of a struggle is that a lot of the public and government data is published as PDFs. So although it's often published as tables, as you can see there, it's published as a PDF, which means you effectively have to extract the data from the PDF into a spreadsheet or a CSV file. So this example shows something from the City of Tshwane's Service Delivery Budget Implementation Plan for June this year. And essentially, and just to give you some background, this budget service delivery plan effectively tells you what the City of Tshwane has committed to delivering in terms of services. So that's either building new infrastructure or responding to issues with the, for example, potholes or water connections or electricity supply. So they put all of that information into tables like this in a large PDF, and it covers very specific things. As you can see here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but in their plan for June, they have a project for the construction of a new substation in Monavoni. And the budget for that is 20,000 Rand for this financial year. It's in Ward 8. And the target for Q1 for this year is complete the bulk earthworks. And then they have the targets for the next 3 quarters. So if you, for example, are wanting to build a tool that could track the performance of municipalities, and because in theory, I think all municipalities have to publish these service delivery plans, you could kind of track the performance of municipalities in completing their service delivery commitments. If you can get this data out in a reasonably efficient way. So there are tools like Tabular, which you can use, where it makes the extraction of data a little bit easier, especially from tables. So it automates the extraction of this data, table data from PDFs. But increasingly, you can start to explore some of the ChatGPT-like tools to extract data from PDFs. I've tried using those for generating content. They obviously have their limitations, and they can create data. They can make up data, and they often have quite a few errors because they're not very mature. So you have to do a lot of verification of the data. But yeah, you might find some of them helpful in processing data that's contained in PDFs. Then hopefully the data is made available as a CSV or Excel sheet in some kind of standard format, standard row column format. So again, going back to the school's data, the basic education, if you go to their website, they make that data available, and you download a spreadsheet for whichever province you're interested in. And then that spreadsheet looks something like I've shown you here. You would then just have to clean up that data. As you can see, again, I'm not sure how visible it is, but you can see the various columns. It tells you the name of the school, the status of the school, the latitude, the longitude, what municipality it's in, the actual address, and there's more columns. So you can explore those columns, but just gives you a sense. This is a much more structured and accessible data set that you still have to clean because there are issues with it, but it's a lot easier than pulling it out of a PDF. And I'll go to some of these examples in a second and put them in the chat. Then another common example is that the data would be on a website itself. So you would then have to, you can, I suppose, copy the data manually, or you can, what's used quite widely is you can run an import HTML. So you can import the website effectively, the web page effectively into a Google Sheet quite easily if the data is quite well structured as a table like this one is. And this is licensing data for air quality. So this one is reasonably well structured, so it should be importable into a Google Sheet with that command line as an example. And there's lots of tutorials and things online to help you do that if you need to. And I suppose most developers are looking out for this if they can get it, is via API. And then you just obviously have to call API, and you can pull the data from whatever source. So one example, and I think it's still running, I think Vuleka Mali has, so the financial ones are a little bit more mature, so they usually have working APIs. So in this case, you can pull the data on, say, the city of Johannesburg's financial performance, their spending data, their income data, and pull it into your app kind of dynamically. So this is, of course, beneficial because you don't then have to download and import the data as a batch. You can just run API queries to pull the data from the source. Yeah, so again, I'm just going to pause there and I'll put a few of the links. I'm not sure if anyone has been putting them in. So let me stop sharing that and I'll just go to my browser. Oops, okay. Sorry, I'm just going to put a couple of links into the chat first, so that you can open them while I talk, or I'll share my screen in a second. Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm posting them in a private chat. Okay, let me try that again. Wasn't paying attention. Okay, municipal money. Putting a bunch of links that you can look at for interest. So I'm going to just share my screen in a second, just go through some of these again. So I've posted okay, so let me just go to browser tab. Okay, I'll just go to browser window. Tiani, can you tell me if that's visible again? I hope I'm still connected.
Can see it. You can see it. Paul.
Okay, great. Oh, thanks. Okay, so this is the toolkit. Again, you can just browse this. It's kind of self-explanatory. I hope most of the links are still working. Then one of the links as an example, as I mentioned, is municipal money. So just to show you, we are picking on Tshwane today, just because it's a NEMISA hackathon. It's going to be in the city. So if we select City of Tshwane, it'll load the municipality. So City of Tshwane loads the municipality. So this is financial performance. What's quite nice, if you're new to the financial space, but you are interested in it, they have quite nice helpers on what the data means. So they've got about indicators, they've got small YouTube clips to explain what the data means, those kinds of things. And then, of course, the data and I'm not sure on municipal money where the download is. It will be there. But anyway, you can see there's different financial data that you can have a look at. One we often track is the capital spending, just because it's a useful indicator or proxy for whether the planned projects the municipality was going to implement are being implemented. Capital budget is quite an interesting one to explore. They have more recently, they've added actual data on individual projects. So for example, there's a project to implement prepaid electricity meters in the municipality for 33 million. So you can go deeper into individual projects, maintenance, etc. So again, if you have a look at the financial data, you can then get an understanding of what it means. And there's now a huge amount of additional data that's been added to this portal. The actual data source, it's here. You would just need to look around. I can't remember with municipal money now where exactly you download the data, but you definitely can. And just let us know if you have any issues. Maybe just to show you again, let's just try a different area for a change. So it's okay, not bringing up so politely. Let's just try another metro quickly. Okay, let's just choose eThekwini. So WasiMap, there is a new version of WasiMap, but this one is a good intro version. So WASI-map is very useful if you're looking for kind of very baseline demographic data related to a specific area. It is also downloadable. A lot of it is based on Census 2011, but as you can see there is also Community Survey 2016 data at a municipal level. So you just need to look at how old the data is or not. So hopefully with the new census data coming through, hopefully later this year, these types of platforms will be updated with that data. And then you can see things down to a ward level. But this covers things like election-related data, demographics, so language, gender, household information, and then service delivery. So a common one of interest is things like service delivery related, say, water connections. So do people have piped water inside their house? Do they have a yard? Is it a shared water source? Those kinds of things. Electricity access, those kinds of things. And then you can explore or download the data. So whichever data I might be interested in. So this will be for the whole of eThekwini. If I just explore the data there, I can get to the tables, and then I can download the data as a CSV or Excel, GeoJSON, KML. So yeah, so if you want to pull the data into an app or do your own analysis with the data, it's quite easy to retrieve that data. Then just to show you again, this is the Department of Basic Education website. If you Google schools master list data, one of the first search results should be this. And then all you do is you just go to your province that you're interested in and download, and it will download a spreadsheet of that data that I showed you earlier. And then just a last example from a totally different space is air quality. If you Google SAAQIS for South Africa, so if you Google SAAQIS, it should bring you should pick up this website. And then you can go through the menu, but essentially to analyze, so what you can do is then bring up, sorry if I can drag this, let me just, okay, let me just show this first and then I'll show you later how I got to there. But essentially you can go to every air quality monitoring station in South Africa and get the data on air quality measurements from that station. So in this case, I've again picked the city of Tshwane. I've selected the Hammanskraal air quality monitoring station. These are the different air quality parameters, so sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, ozone, particulate matter. So all of these are kind of elements of air quality that people are interested in. And you can then you can choose what timeline you'd like to see that air quality information for. So you can do it for a whole year or a month. And then all you do once you've selected your start date. So I've chosen from the 1st of September this year. I just display the data. Hopefully it works. And it looks a bit incomplete. So some of the measurements are not running correctly. But anyway, you can start seeing that there's data. One of the big ones is sulfur dioxide. So you can see there's data and it's being measured at hourly intervals. So you can see how much sulfur dioxide is in the Hammanskraal area. And then this, I think this is covering the month. So 1st of September to October. And then you can just download the data as an Excel spreadsheet and do your own analysis or plug it into your own app. They do, as far as I remember, have an API, but I think it's only by direct relationship with the department that you can access the API. So for now, you would have to just download the data manually. But I suppose it's something you could always engage the department on to see if you could get access. Yeah, anyway, so those are just some examples of accessing data. So again, I'll stop there just to see if there's any questions. I'm happy to also, if there's a data source you're really interested in, we could even try and find it now, just to give you an example and to show how painful it is. So I'm sure, are there any questions or any data sources anyone would like to attempt finding, and I can see how we do? Does anyone want to volunteer a topic of interest? I'll just pause for a second. You're welcome to put it in the chat if you do. It'd be nice to have a little challenge. Otherwise, I'll pick one randomly. Drug use data. Okay. Interestingly, I think someone did ask that. We had that in the hackathon or another event recently. So yeah, that one is somewhat challenging. I haven't. I'm trying to think what we did in that case. It would be monitored, and most. I can't say which would be the direct route. My feeling, I'd be interested to know if firstly Stats SA does track any of that kind of data in terms of surveys, like their household surveys, like asking whether, and I'm just going to show you, and I suppose I'm just speaking to my search strategy for drug use data. So I would probably, I mean, aside from just Googling drug use data for South Africa and just seeing what pops up, I mean, you can always do that. But I would probably start off, I'm just going to, am I sharing? Okay, cool, I'm sharing still. So I've got the Stats SA, and one of the, I'm just saying household survey because it's quite a broad survey that's done somewhat regularly. It covers quite a lot of ground. So you can often pick up a lot of things in the household survey. Oh, sorry, it's going directly to the PDF. Let's just see if I can get to the publications page. Oh, interesting. Oh, grief. Okay, let me leave Stats SA. Anyway, General Household Survey is very useful and interesting. They capture quite a lot of low-level data on a range of topics. So that's one you might want to have a look at. Otherwise, I would be interested to see what might be on the Department of Health platforms. The Department of Health website hasn't been great recently in terms of the data availability. And then it's maybe another proxy is, and it would be to look at the South African Police Service crime data. So they do track, I'm going to Google it, SAPS crime statistics. So if you Google SAPS crime statistics, it'll take you to their site and you can download their crime statistics data. So I know they do track drug-related crime, and they do track it per police station. So you would be able to get a sense of the drug issues in different areas, and with lots of caveats about, various things, but you would start to be able to get a sense of drug-related reporting of drug-related crime, with, I suppose, gives you a sense of drug use within different parts of the country at quite a low level, at a station level, so you could compare areas. So yeah, some just initial suggestions. Okay, Kayla, we can come back to you. I'll just touch on a couple of the others, and you can comment if you like. Medical interaction data. I'm assuming you mean that would be how data, so how different, I suppose, drugs interact with or pharmaceuticals interact with each other. You can clarify that. Again, well, this starts to get into quite a tricky space in an area that you want to be quite careful in. So, and maybe it doesn't speak directly to this, but what's quite interesting is the Department of Health publishes guidelines on the use of medication for different scenarios, which are, I suppose, intended for health practitioners, but just for a lay person, it's quite interesting to see how they define those guidelines for very specific use cases around the use of medicine. I'm just trying to remember that now. Actually, I'll go to the toolkit. So I think it is in the toolkit. So again, in all of these use cases, if you're going beyond, for an initial exploration, it's great to explore and just understand what's out there. But you would obviously, anything health related, you absolutely want to do with a health practitioner person. So I think it's called guidelines. So if you have a look on the toolkits, standard treatment guidelines, I think this link might work. This link has been changing for a while. Okay, so the site's not great. I'm not going to go into it yet, but you can have a look there, and you can just check the certificates and go there if you like. But there's standard treatment guidelines and essential medicines list, which is quite interesting, just to see how health practitioners, how the use of medicine is guided by quite specific guidelines, which you might be interested in exploring. And it's an interesting use case because you may want to, for example, make those guidelines more accessible through a web app or something. So they're all in PDFs. So what might be interesting is, could those guidelines be in a more accessible form? I'll stop once I get to the end of the 4 that are there. Leather industry, waste repurposing and recycling data. Yeah, actually the waste recycling is quite an interesting one. Actually in Solplaiki, I remember back in a hackathon, we had someone did a really great solution or project around waste recycling. So they actually got that from municipal waste. I think it was the municipal waste plan. So this is much more localized. You might be looking at it from more of a national level, but just for interest, you might to Solplaiki waste management plan. So you can probably do this for most municipalities. So Francis Bard, okay, so it's a bit high level. But if you go into their waste management plan, they sometimes capture quite a lot of data on waste-related activities, because they would have potentially had a consultant in to do some kind of survey to see what kind of waste is produced at different parts of the municipality. So usually I try to have a look in the waste management plan to see what kind of tables of data or spatial data there is. And usually you can find a table that speaks to different waste types and where those wastes are produced. So here's information on the different types of waste and their fraction masses, whatever that means. Percentages of waste by household type, I think. So all of this is potentially interesting, because then you can understand what is the mix of different waste. I know at the one hackathon, someone did quite a nice analysis by different parts of the municipality on what the proportions of different types of waste are, that kind of thing. So just as an example. And then I'm Singita, just going to university. Oops, lost my screen. Singita, university higher institution related data. So if you have a look at the toolkit on education data resources, we do have a section on higher education. I can't remember any recent updates to this, so I'm hoping the links work, but it'll give you indication. If these links don't work, at least you have the title of the data and you can try Google it. But yeah, things like financial statistics, NSFAS reports, occupation-specific descriptions, locations of TVET colleges, I know have all been out there. Yeah, so a range of things in this section. I think I'll just put the link so you can jump to it. If you're interested, hopefully the links work. And then I'll do Zakele's one quickly, loan approvals by demographics. Yeah, that's an interesting one, because it starts getting into private sector data. But something like the National Credit Regulator, and I don't remember doing this before, it might be under our, they may have data, public data on that. So if you have a look at the National Credit Regulator, you would be able to find a lot of interesting data. I'm just trying to, well, I mean, something you might be interested in is the registers. So this kind of data on, who are registered credit providers could be of interest as a start. But there are probably other things from a data perspective. It's interesting that it's taking us here. Anyway, there seem to be some quite interesting databases on the National Credit Regulator. So usually we look for something like either a register or a report or something like that. So publications is usually quite useful. Consumer credit market reports could be a good one. And this is typical of something that, they actually have the data set, which might be a spreadsheet if you click on it. So I'm just going to put that link in so you can, sorry. So that's for the credit regulator. So this is like quite an interesting data set that you might want to work with. Okay, so it's downloading a spreadsheet on my side. So that's quite nice. So it looks like you can get a spreadsheet and just to see the kind of data. This is really topical, so it could be quite interesting to work with this. Then they have the tables of data, unsecured credits. Yeah, so this is all loan related data, and they'll break it down by different parameters. So yeah, you could have a lot of fun with this one, I think. So quite a nice topic to explore. Who was that? Zakele. Yeah, so like Zakele, I think there's some really nice data there for you to explore. Okay, I think we'll stop there. I don't see any more. Just Caleb. So Tiani can, I think, comment on Caleb's question. My view, I'll just comment from my perspective before Tiani comes in. I mean, for a lot of app-related things, you may generate your own data. I mean, I was generating data, dummy data, using ChatGPT recently, just because I wanted text type of data. So I think there'd be a lot of options. So probably public data, like the data I've been showing you, synthetically generated data, and possibly data that's created through your application itself, or collected through your application. So is it Nick will give us the real answer? I'm just saying.
Okay, sorry for disturbing, Dr. Paul. Sorry about that. To answer on Caleb, yes, just to add in line of what Dr. Paul said, yes, you can use your own dummy data, but not you cannot recreate your own data set, but you're going to use dummy data. Dummy data sets, not your own, not recreate the whole sets. Just just to get some few things that you are unable to access. But I do believe that HSRC and NEMISA, they have a lot of data that can accommodate most of the things that you'll be requiring. So if need be that thing that the data sets that you want are unavailable, yes, you'll be permitted to use dummy data.
Yeah, that's a really great point, actually. What we get a lot of requests for at hackathons for people building apps is they want to access the Home Affairs database for kind of ID, to do identity verifications and things like that. So obviously the banks and others have those kind of direct connections to those data sources, but because you're not going to get that at a hackathon, you just have to create dummy data, especially for those kinds of use cases. Sorry, Tiani?
Oh, yes. I wanted to just re-emphasize, because we did address this question with regards to using own data sets. So we addressed it during the webinar and also last week as well. But the key thing is the team at UNISA, working together with NEMISA, are preparing data sets to be availed for the hackathon. And then as an additional measure, it was indeed this session. And I'm really loving how teams are asking how do you find certain data sets, and Dr. Paul is doing a fantastic job in that regard, in showing you how to use, basically how to find data sets. So, at what Nick said around dummy data, that is an option that we do not recommend at all. But if you can't find data that is being prepared from UNISA, NEMISA, if Dr. Paul Plantinga can't assist you with finding certain data sets as such, for testing purposes, you can create a simple data set against a realistic data structure that would essentially emulate the kind of a story you want to tell. So, for an example, if you wanted a data set from the South African national ID infrastructure, for an example, and you can't get that data set to test from Home Affairs, of which they wouldn't anyway. But for testing purposes, you will then just maybe look at how a solution could interface to Home Affairs. Obviously, there are APIs for that, but these days those APIs are not free as such. But I'll just give you an example with this Home Affairs. But before you go and use your own sample data set, please make sure that you have exhausted all the channels of the Datathon. And in the past, the teams were basically penalized for not considering the data sets that were provided by the Datathon. So please make sure that you are first, make sure that your first point in getting data sets is from the Datathon. And then if all fails, and we have also said that everything has failed, you can then use a dummy or a sample data set. But you are also allowed to use external data sets outside the hackathon, but you are still encouraged to look at integrating anything that is provided. I hope that is clear as such. And we rather than using dummy data, let's call it a sample data set that can be created, because a dummy data set could have a different annotation. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Tiani. Can you hear me? Sorry, I can't see. I think I'm unmuted. Okay. All right. So we don't have much time left. I just did want to. I'll just comment on questions one, because it's a really popular question. So this, again, I've put the link in. If you go to the National Integrated Water Information System, and actually we have a direct link to the water quality tab, you can get to the water quality table, and then you can select your province that you have of interest, and then they have different measuring stations, different parts of the province. And then if you go to these tables, you can download the data sets, and you'd have to explore what these things mean, but you can then download the CSV for that data, and obviously you'd have to understand what it all means and what a measuring point is and those kinds of things. But they are measuring data water quality quite actively, and it seems quite current. Actually, it seems better than I remember it, so it looks quite reasonably usable. There's a bit of no data, but it's not too bad, it seems. Okay, so I'm going to stop looking at data sources and just switch to the presentation. I don't have too much to add.
Sorry, Dr. Paul. Perhaps let's give Jocelyn a platform to talk because she raised the hand.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot Jocelyn. Oh, was it Rejoice or Jocelyn? I think
Jocelyn.
Okay.
Oh, it was Rejoice. Sorry, Rejoice. Please go on.
Good afternoon. No, I just wanted to say I had popped a question on the chat regarding the weather parameters such as temperature, rainfall, humidity.
Yeah, sorry, Rejoice, I missed yours. Yeah, weather is actually a really troublesome one. So yeah, the South African Weather Service, actually, we can just have a quick look for interest. Has an API. For interest, I'll show you. Unfortunately, it's not that accessible. So we usually try to find a workaround, and I'm just trying to remember the workaround. Okay, anyway, so if you Google it, you can get a sense. So there is a weather API. Anyway, so there's a bit of description that they have an API. There's a bit of a story, and I think you may be lucky in being able to run a test. So it could be usable for a hackathon. Possibly not, but anyway, there's an API via Averages that you can have a look at just for interest. It seems new. There seems to be new information there that you can explore. So that's the more official kind of weather data source via the South African Weather Service. But otherwise, just in terms of kind of aggregate data, so that's more live weather data, that kind of thing. Aggregate weather, kind of historical weather data, we did try to assemble that data a while back. I think it's under, might have been under agriculture, and I'm just trying to remember the name. The SAON data has become quite a useful data source. SAON, catalog, okay, there we go. I just want to see if this one has that data for you. Anyway, I'm just going to put the link. I'm not sure if it's got weather data, but others might find this useful. So SAON is not necessarily focused on weather data, but I think they collect, actually my blocker might be stopping. I think you asked about rainfall, is that right? So anyway, let's just try. It seems like at a farm level, which maybe is interesting. So they do have some, they have future rainfall data, which is interesting. So I think SAON, the catalog could be quite a good route for it now. The South African previous agriculture department had some data along those lines. But I think their portal is no longer really running these days, from what I remember. So let's just see if it is running. But if you go to agriculture data resources, yeah, something's up with their portal. So they used to have that data, and you may be able to just Google it. It might be archived somewhere. I don't think we archived it anywhere. But yeah, so maybe SAON, I would say SAON is your best route for now, or you can explore the South African Weather Service API as a start. And sensor, yeah, agreed. The Earth observation team, yeah, for sure. So yeah, if you just Google and see if the Earth observation group at sensor makes any of that data available. Yeah, and I'm sure others at the hackathon will be able to kind of guide you on that kind of thing too. It's not an easy one. It's not an easy answer. Usually, just because the South African Weather Service, the availability of the South African Weather Service data is not that easy. Okay, just because we're running out of time, I'm just going to jump to the presentation again and finish up. So this is just
just a quick one, Dr. Paul. In terms of time, there is a window to go until 6, if that still allows from your side. Just continue. Thanks.
Thanks. If my voice lasts that long. Okay, we'll see how we go. It depends on questions. Just while I remember, I'm just putting the LALAPA responsible AI framework for data science in the chat. So as I was mentioning earlier, just in terms of how you work with data and how you build models, that kind of thing, it's worth having a look at that. And then just coming back to the presentation, so I'll go from here, and that aligns with what I'm going to touch on here briefly, although most of this is a bit more generic. So just some very kind of specific pointers and examples, and you can go into more of this yourself. The old Google material design guidelines I find them very interesting, just from an app and data visualization, data experience guidance, because Google obviously has a lot of people thinking quite hard about how data is presented to make user experiences really good. But they also address a lot of the things related to kind of making sure that the way you work with and present data via apps or tools is more trustworthy, and ideally you don't manipulate people in how you present the data, because as mentioned earlier, some of those examples like polo drivers being the worst drivers on the road, that's, by superficial look at the data or the way you present that data, people could conclude that, but if you dig into the data, you actually find a different truth in a sense. So this is really starting to touch on how you present data in a way that is trustworthy and responsible. So this is just an example of how you present your data so that you don't exaggerate. And a lot of the political parties do this. You see this on social media a lot. They manipulate, especially the zero axis. So just to exaggerate their growth or their performance in terms of votes, those kinds of things. So one of the things in terms of the data viz guidelines on Google is always start your bar charts at a zero baseline. So here you can see it's 0%, and you can see the growth over time is that's kind of the more truthful representation of the growth over time. Whereas here, this is an example of how they've manipulated the axes so that they exaggerate the growth. So as you can tell, if you're in a new political party and you're wanting to exaggerate the amount of growth you have, you make your y-axis start at 20% instead of 0, and then it looks like your growth is much faster than it really is relative to your kind of base. So that's just an example of how people manipulate their data visualization and what you shouldn't do, really. And because bar charts are used a lot in apps and things, it's just something to keep in mind. And there are various other guidelines. Just more broadly, again, for building more trustworthy apps and models, these are guidelines, an India handbook on data protection and privacy for developers, focusing on AI. And they address, I think it's 6 different principles and quite practical things that you can do to make to be more responsible in how you build your apps and your models. And that addresses things like transparency, fairness, privacy, etc., as I was mentioning earlier. So this covers the whole kind of value chain of model development and deployment. So they give you quite specific questions and guidelines on how you can be more responsible. I'm not sure if it's a scoring criteria in the hackathon, but over time, I know security is a big one for Geek Culture team. This goes a little bit, as you can see, security is one of them, but this goes a little bit broader into other areas that are especially relevant to the AI space, such as bias and privacy and transparency. Again, just going to transparency as an example. This is from Google's guidelines on AI, on the development of AI applications. They've got nice videos that talk through this. Obviously, Google's got its own flaws, but they do provide some quite accessible guidance. And this is just an example of an app where, again, they show you a bad example, a good example. So, for example, if you were building an app that guides people on fitness and their training regimes, what training they should do, and it's kind of AI, kind of machine learning driven, and obviously drawing on data from your own. I mean, you might have I don't know. I suppose people might have smartwatches or some other data collection, as well as data on training routes, those kinds of things. So here they've automatically, it's recommending a training route in the case on the right, which is a bad example. It just says we've adjusted your route without any kind of explanation of how the route was determined. On the left is a better example where they say they've adjusted the route, and these are the reasons why they've adjusted the route based on it having an even surface, a slow pace, a minimal elevation. So it's just about being more transparent in how you communicate what your model is, how your model is making a recommendation if you're building an machine learning kind of recommendation algorithm, as an example. And then lastly, just to finish off, I mentioned some of these tools that we worked with before. Some I haven't worked with in a while, but Tabula I mentioned earlier for extracting data from PDFs. OpenRefine is very useful for cleaning data. Flourish is a great tool for Flourish, and Data Wrapper are very good for visualizing data. So if you just want to do if you want to do interactive graphics that you can embed in an app or a blog or something like that, Flourish and Data Wrapper are really nice, and a nice alternative to using Excel or Power BI, I suppose, is nice. But Flourish and Data Wrapper are very quick to work with, easy to set up a quick data visualization and embed it in a website or something like that. And then Kepler, we used to use it quite a lot for very quick spatial data visualization or analysis. So I'm not sure if it's still very active, but anyway, Kepler.gl was what we used back then. Very easy to work with. And there are, of course, many others. And you probably, if you're working in some more advanced areas of data, then you probably are working with a lot of other tools. And especially if you're into the machine learning space, you're working with Kaggle and some of those data sources. So I haven't mentioned much on Kaggle today. I don't know, the Geek Culture team might. There are probably many other alternatives to Kaggle now, but I'm just going to put it into the chat so that you haven't used it before, you're aware of it as an example, as a source of data. So it's more global, but I think there would be South African sources. So Kaggle is used a lot for things like I think there's like radiography applications, and if you're wanting to test a lot of if you're into machine learning and things like that, then Kaggle has always been quite a popular option. And then is it Zindi? I don't know if Zindi makes data available. I'm just gonna put it in. If you're into data science and hackathons and things, then I think they have data sources there as well. But anyway, Zindi is also might be of interest because they do a lot of challenges, which are quite interesting. Okay, so I think that is all I was going to cover today. Yeah, so That's it from me. Have I stopped sharing? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Happy to answer any more questions and to look for data sources if you'd like to have a look quickly. Yeah. I think, was it Caleb who wanted to speak?
Yes, Caleb, you are recognized.
Oh, Hosanna's on the call. Hi, Hosanna.
I joined very. I had the popularity of the course, and I had to join after the last meeting. Nice seeing you, Paul.
Yes, likewise. Caleb, oh, you're asking about mental health, Caleb. Oh,
Yes, sir. Is there a possibility to get data set to mental health?
yeah, okay. I'm trying to have a think. Yeah, I'm thinking Department of Health, as I mentioned, Department of Health's data sources are not the easiest to find and work with. There probably are I've looked at mental health association sources before. I'm trying to think. I can't remember off the top of my head, but what I would suggest, again, is just trying to work out your kind of search strategy. You could look at Department of Health, but I think you might have a lot of pain there. I would probably look at, I'll try to locate mental health associations in the country, because there's a good chance they would have commissioned research on those kinds of things. I'm just checking on the toolkit. You can search the toolkit for different things. Okay. So yeah, in the toolkit, if you go to the source, there's a mental health. It's more mental health services, so it's not really mental health data necessarily. But anyway, if you look in that section, there's mental health. Yeah, as you say, sister. Yeah, SADAG is a good source, and it'd be interesting to know what data they have. I'm not sure if we had them on our portal, but we've got. Okay, so it was, yeah, we just included it under broader spectrum of health-related services. So we just had the SA Federation for Mental Health, and they have a health services map, mental health services map. So that's as far as we went. But yeah, I can't, as most people have asked about that before, I just can't remember where we found anything. But yeah, SADAG is, I think, a good one to start with. And then you usually you start seeing references to other sources from there. And some of the generic portals could be quite useful. Yeah, Preston's question is a good one. And that's often the big thing with hackathons, is that we work at quite a superficial level. So there's not always domain experts, and maybe Tiani and Hosanna can comment on that. Hosanna, I seem to remember that you would bring in, there were a couple of domains where you did have sector people involved. So, and Tiani, maybe you can comment on that. I don't know if there are any sector domain specialists joining the hackathon this year.
Yeah, I guess you can. Okay, but yeah. Usually, we used to produce some data sets, but let's see what Tiani says. What he says.
All right. Firstly, maybe to observe protocol. I just like to. Well, I was planning to recognize Prof. Hosanna, who is here on the call. He has been part of this journey from the beginning, but perhaps as we close off, I will be asking for a few words, and obviously from NEMISA side as well, as we end the masterclass session. But in terms of sector professionals or domain professionals in that regard, that has been one of the key considerations to prepare for this datathon. So last week, you will remember that we had two presenters. One of them was Mr. Lucky Ditedu. So Mr. Lucky Ditedu is one of the top practitioners in terms of of the green economy, focusing on water, energy, and climate change and nexus. So he's one of the primary mentors around anything green, anything water. From Geek Culture side, we do have working relationships with the Water Research Commission, for an example. You know, if you are speaking around water issues as well. We also do have relations with the young water professionals. So for any kind of a sector, we are then able to bring in such resources. But maybe to reiterate the structure of the master classes on why we took this route this year. We're going on a 4-week journey, and week one last week was to focus on how do you get to understand your idea more and align it. This week we're focusing on the data sets, and then the rest of the weeks will be technical as such. But all these weeks really are meant to ensure that we get to understand your solution and the type of resources. So do not be shy to ask for a type of a resource. We can make that available, and if not, we can bring in something closer to what you are looking for. But in essence, yes, you will get access to such sector practitioners. Thanks. Back to you, Dr. Paul.
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks, Tiani. I was going to say back to you, Tiani. But yeah, just to say thanks from my side. It's been great interacting and searching for data sets. That's always good fun from my side. So, but I hope some of the rest of it was also useful and interesting. So yeah, enjoy today, and good luck for the hackathon. Thanks, Tiani and team.
Thanks so much, Paul.
All right. Since Prof. Hosana has got his mic open, perhaps if you could maybe just share a few words, maybe to help teams align better, also based on past experiences as well. What do teams need to know in terms of the NEMISA Datathon in ensuring that they get to produce the best results? Thanks.
Thanks, T. Thanks, T. You really put me on the spot. But this is a journey that we have taken for a very long time, T. And thanks for always being a partner with us. We've come a long way. And thanks, Paul, as well, for always being there. It's a small world. Personally, we believe very strongly in, and we actually see the power that data is playing in society. It's not well tapped into. And we believe that we can change policy by giving facts on the table. So whatever facts we're able to unearth and actually have a meaningful conversation over and above the data that you're presenting, that's always the winner. Because sometimes we make policy decisions or even just normal business decisions based on heuristic or thumbsuck, or can I say experience, but data gives us the ability to have experience. And data scientists becoming one of the highest paying jobs anywhere you can go. I'm not saying that you should go run away from South Africa, but it's one of the top jobs going around. So I'm always excited and encouraged to see those who are participating. Give it your best effort, but at the end of the day, you've got to sell a solution and not just write code. So keep that at the back of your minds. I think that's what usually stands out. It's always the result and the way you present the result using facts. I think that's let me keep it brief like that so that I stop repeating myself. But thanks so much, T and teams for helping us on this journey. Victoria.
Awesome, Sisvi. Perhaps some parting words, but before that, just to extend words of gratitude to Dr. Paul Plantinga for availing yourself for this masterclass session, and to the teams before we close off. So the key outcome that we would like to see from your team this week is to really consolidate all the data assets that you would need to ensure that your solution get to be developed. So start consolidating all the different kinds of data sets that you need, and then we'll be setting up designated focus through Sonke so that you can have access all weekend to people who can also help to point you to different data sets as such, because as of next week we are starting to focus on the technical aspects of the master classes. So you will be at the hands of the team from Intercodex, who will be introducing you to different technologies and to help put things into technical perspective. Yeah, so there's a question as to mentors already added on Sonke for us to communicate with. Not all of them have been added to Sonke as of yet, but should you need any kind of a mentor at a point in time, you can inbox Nick. Pavalo is also here on the call. Pavalo, you can just say hi on the call. On the chat, so that they get to know who you are. So the team from Geek Culture essentially assist in coordinating and helping find the mentor in need specifically. So for now, there are only general mentors, but as we end the master classes, that's when we're going to be assigning mentors to different teams as such. But for now, you've got a free flow and access to ensure that we help you consolidate all the different aspects of your project. On that regard, I would like to call on Sisvi to do closing remarks for us as we end this masterclass.
Thank you, T. Thank you, Paul, for being here. This was quite insightful. I'm excited, and all the links that have been shared, I hope the teams that are here will be going into them, checking what is there. And yes, like Diane said earlier on, if you feel you need somebody that is that specializes, please do mention so that we can try and organize those and like bring somebody closest to what you're looking for if we cannot find the right people. And with that said, I think, guys, we're ready to go. We're ready to rock and roll. Do your best, and let's meet again on the Sonke platform. Thank you.
All right. With those, oh yes, there's a question with regards to the survey. I'm not sure if Kosi is here. What that will then for anything related to the survey, just respond to the email that you got from Kosi Corner, because she is leading that part. But perhaps Prof. Hosani, if you could answer that from the survey perspective.
The question was about the survey, right?
Yes.
Yes. If you've not filled in the survey, it would really have been nice if you filled it in by now. The idea was to measure, because we are academics, we like measuring things, is to measure how much you know before you start the master classes, how much you know after the master classes, and how much you know after the hackathon. Believe it or not, the way we understand the journey that you are going through helps to shape. Every year we try to improve. Every year we try to improve. So your feedback is very, very, very important to us. So if you've not filled it out, and you're going to fill it out, please do. And fill it out as much as possible if you can put yourself in your frame of mind before you started the master classes, because even after today's class, I feel much more smarter. Although I joined almost halfway, I've learned a lot. So I'm not too sure whether you're able to fill them out now, but yeah. I'll speak to Nkosikona, but we'll drop you an email.
Okay, so Kosikona is now on the call. The question was, may I ask, on the NEMISA Masterclass pre-survey, there's a request for unique identifier code. Where do we get it?
Oh, yes. Is Nkosikona here? I think she's using the email address.
I think on the email I indicated that they must use their team names. I'll check the email and get back to you on how it was supposed to be structured. But you create your own and then you keep it safe. But I think the first letter was supposed to be your team name. I'm not sure if everyone could hear me.
Yes, we did. I was about to ask if the asker is Sister Mulebogeng. Are you clear with that?
Guys, can you hear me?
Can indicate in the chat if you are clear, or you can just unmute. Okay, not really. All right, maybe
I think what Nkosikona was saying about the unique identifier code is that a team should create their own. Maybe they can use their team name as the identifier code.
Yes. Okay. Lost her. Okay.
Thank you, sister.
All right. Guys, I guess please do enjoy the rest of your evening. Talk up, please go on.
Hey Tiani, thanks for the session, Mr. Paul. I just wanted to, this might be like a bit off topic. I just wanted to find out like the structure of the Datathon. It is my understanding that we would all have to be at the UNISA, what's this? Yeah, you need to be at UNISA for those 3 days, right? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I just wanted to know regarding these like unique identifier code, because they mentioned that it might be something to do with traveling. Are we required to then travel are we going to be traveling for those 3 days, like for 1 day going back home and then choose the other day and the next day? So for those 3 days, we will be traveling back and like to and back, if that makes sense.
No. Okay, no. So you do not have to worry about that. You don't have to be traveling every day. So it's a hackathon. It's going to start and then end. So the aim is to ensure that the journey is continuous, non-stop. Team #no sleep. But we are also busy finalizing a participant briefing document, in which you'll essentially get all the different information, what to prepare, how to prepare, what to bring, because we want you to be as comfortable as possible. And the team that's coordinating are busy preparing a lot of things to ensure that the environment is conducive. There's comfort. You are well covered. With everything. So the best is being prepared for you guys. Right. So another person that's on the call is Kingsley, otherwise known as Skinny. So do inbox him on Sonke. He's part of the geek culture team that is looking after you guys as you prepare for the hackathon.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much, Diane.
Sharp.
Mr. T?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I say something?
All right.
There's an email that Nkosi Kona sent to everybody to say, please complete the documentation. It's going to be used for your travel arrangements. So please do complete. Please put your team names, where you are coming from, so that we know how many people we need to be collecting from which point. So please do, guys, do complete the form. I think Diani and the team sent it earlier, but the information is still incomplete. So please